Are you thinking about traveling to Santiago, Chile in 2024? Well, I just got back from spending a little bit of time in Santiago, and I've spent a lot of my time over the last couple of years in Latin America. So I'd like to think I have a decent idea of what I would consider a safe or unsafe city. In this video, I want to go through my kind of thoughts and opinions on overall if Santiago is safe as a foreigner visiting the city. Unfortunately, this isn't going to be from the perspective of a local living there, as that is just not what I am. I am a Canadian who visited Chile. So without further ado, let's get into the video. We are having some coffee as per usual. It is a beautiful day here in Buenos Aires. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Alex. This is the Lifting Nomad. If you haven't been here before, I pretty much just travel, lift some weights, and stay in like a mediocre shape while enjoying the little things in life like tequila, wine, good food, going out, meeting people, while keeping a focus on my wellness and my health. In this video, I want to talk again about how safe is Santiago in 2024 as a foreigner. I did not go outside of the city to other parts of Chile. One of the girls that I met up with had just done a hike of the Chilean Patagonia, and she did give me a little bit of insight, but this video is specifically going to be talking about Santiago, the capital city, the biggest city in Chile, as a foreigner and how safe it is to visit. So really quick, a little bit of background. I've been to, I guess, like 25 countries over the last couple of years, mostly through Latin America and Europe. And at this point, I think I've gotten a pretty good idea of what I would consider a safe or unsafe city. Generally, no matter which city you're in, like the basic philosophy of trying to stay safe doesn't really change that much. Like, don't go to the shittiest neighborhoods at night, don't walk around with your iPhone out, don't have a fancy camera, don't have a lot of bling like jewelry and fancy gold watches, anything like that. Just like basic traveling common sense is going to help you be in a better place no matter where you are in the world. So things, like I said, walking alone at night, being drunk on the street noticeably, going into sketchy areas that maybe you shouldn't, venturing off on your own when you don't know where you're going. And as much as I love exploring cities during the day, at night it just simply isn't the same. So my advice in every city I go to is generally the same. Do not just venture down into places you don't know much about, especially without someone local, especially without someone who speaks the language. But overall, let's talk a little bit specifically about Chile then. So Chile, Santiago is the capital city. It's pretty much directly west from where I'm staying right now in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So the flight was pretty simple to get there, got into the airport. Generally, safety tips in the airport, it was like a very big, modern, new airport. I was very, very impressed with how easily laid out it was and how easy it was to get my Uber from the airport and also to the airport. Generally, anywhere in Latin America, I do not recommend taking cabs from outside of the airport. It's an extremely common scam in virtually every country where if you go out, you just pick up a cab. Maybe they're not a real cab or maybe they are, but still it unfortunately does happen where people do get into cabs where they don't know the person, maybe they don't know the language or the city or the country. They get in that cab drives you kind of maybe a block or 2 blocks away. Maybe they have friends waiting, maybe they just pull a gun on you. Like, unfortunately, there are bad things that happen specifically with taxis from airports. It's a very, very common thing. I'm not sure how often it happens in Santiago. I did read into a few different stories of things like this happening, but either way, when you don't have the guarantee of what kind of ride you're getting, I just recommend never taking a taxi. Even back home in Toronto, I got credit card frauded for almost $10,000 from a taxi in Canada. So, you know, me, I do have a little bit of bias from my personal experiences with how shitty cab drivers can be. So I just generally never take them unless I absolutely have to. So what can you do? Obviously, Uber is pretty inexpensive, was easily accessible, super easy to find my car, and then it just went straight to my hotel from the airport, so it was really easy. I think alternatively to that as well, you can have like a private bus service from some of the more fancy hotels, maybe a private driver, something like that scheduled. Just I recommend not taking a taxi. And that is inclusive of driving around the city later at night. Even more common, I think, if you're in the nightlife area, maybe drunk, walking down the street, a cab pulls up beside you, offers a ride. Pretty good chance you can get robbed there. I mean, in places like Colombia, people get like ransomed. So, you know, just keep that in mind. Generally, don't take a taxi. So what kind of areas should you stay in? Generally, it's funny when I was trying to look up like what are the least safe neighborhoods for me to go to avoid them. During the day, they generally say there isn't anything particularly unsafe. You know, obviously they say the more western communes, so like closer to the airport, tends to be less safe than the eastern side of the city. Almost like a dividing line right down the middle through Centro. Anything to the east generally is more safe than anything to the west. Of course, that's going to be just not every single time. There are always going to be outliers, but I'm saying in general, that is what they say. So specifically, like any neighborhood right around the airport, I would not really recommend going exploring in. Maybe if you're doing a tour with some local guides who speak Spanish, or just like, you know, you're doing like a paid tour, that could be a decent thing. But I think the city also just has so much to offer in the nicer areas that it's not necessarily needed to go check it out. Like I've been to Comuna 13 in Medellin, for instance, and it was a really cool like cultural experience that's become super popular to go see the artwork and the dancing and the food. But there's other communes that are in Medellin that are, you know, equally on, let's say, economic status, but are not safe to go visit. So just keep that in mind when you are here. Just don't go exploring more than you need to. So where should you stay? Specifically, there's a few neighborhoods that most people recommend in like the northeast part of town. I actually stayed at the Mucure Santiago Centro Hotel, which is kind of near the Bella Artes neighborhood, or the La Estaria neighborhood, which is super highly recommended neighborhoods to stay in if you're visiting the city as a tourist. They have a lot of nice restaurants, a lot of nice hotels, things to do at night, and it was generally seemed very safe. It's also really close to the National Library building, which was super cool to go check out. We ended up getting a tattoo in that neighborhood as well. Maybe I'll show that at a later video. But those two are generally like super recommended as well. And then as you go kind of like a little bit east, you have things like Providencia and Vitacura. And then generally the most like, I guess, affluent neighborhood is called Las Condes, which is like really far east of the city, kind of close to approaching up the Andes Mountains, which is generally where the most affluent Santiago locals live. Kind of right before that is like the Barrio El Golf, which, as it sounds, has like a golf neighborhood, and that's where places like the Ritz-Carlton, the W, like a lot of the higher end hotels are in that neighborhood. With that being said, in La Estaria, we did have one of the hotels called the Singular, which was another 5-star hotel, which was super beautiful. We ended up staying there at the restaurant downstairs for a few nights. We went up to the bar for the rooftop bar for breakfast one day. Very nice hotel if you do get a chance to come. I think staying there maybe not worth it, considering that I was able to access most of the amenities, even though my hotel was like kind of around the corner for 1/5 the price. Now let's just talk about like walking around. During the day, we did quite a lot of exploring in those neighborhoods I had mentioned there around Centro and Providencia and La Estaria and up to Recoleta. And it seemed very safe and clean during the day. A pretty heavy police presence in a lot of these more touristy neighborhoods as well. Like obviously, you know, you do get a little bit of the chaos of tons of people walking down the street side by side. So if you had the opportunity to be pickpocketed, if you had like, you know, a fancy camera bag on your back, or you weren't paying attention and left your phone on the table on the sidewalk, like things can get pickpocketed. But in terms of like anything violent or mugging that I saw, I didn't really feel that at all. Generally, I think at this point I have a pretty good barometer of if I'm in a safe neighborhood, if I should be like extra vigilant or extra careful of where I am. And just walking around these neighborhoods, I didn't really get a feeling for that. Not to say that bad things don't happen, but overall I thought it was fairly safe and fairly clean to go exploring during the day in these neighborhoods. I would absolutely recommend that for even foreigners who don't speak Spanish. At night, things do change a little bit. We did a pub crawl from the Providencia neighborhood and then walked kind of up into Recoleta. It was a very big pub crawl. I would say we were probably 100 people with like 5 escorts, pub crawl escorts, relax. From the actual hostel who were locals and obviously spoke Spanish and knew the neighborhoods. But when you're in that massive of a group, there's not really anything that can go wrong unless you get separated from the group and go off on your own. But if you're generally like sticking with the people from that group, you're gonna have absolutely no problems on that walk or in any of the neighborhoods you're going to. We kind of ended up just like going to these clubs, taking over the dance floor, taking over the outside, getting a bunch of drinks, and then we would just roll to the next bar. I think we hit 4 by the end of the night, and it was very safe when I was in that group. Now, with that being said, one of the nights we did venture off kind of on our own a little bit in the Recoleta neighborhood, and almost immediately when I got off of the street where the bar we went to one of the same like bars or clubs that we had gone to with the pub crawl, and we went by ourselves. And this night it was a little bit more obvious as soon as we got off that busy drag of of bars that we maybe shouldn't be walking alone at night. Just started to get a little bit more grimy. There were more people like kind of on the street, not walking around, just like lingering. And that's kind of when you get to the sense of, all right, if I walk around this corner, maybe there's somebody who's gonna take my shit. Again, we were lucky that nothing specifically happened, but I do think it is just worth mentioning for anyone who wants to come check out Santiago. Other than that, Ubers were super convenient, super safe. There was no like issues getting one late at night. They didn't take that long. They were pretty inexpensive. As always, I do generally recommend trying to learn some Spanish. Definitely fortunate in the sense that Santiago had a lot of English, which I was pleasantly surprised by, but they did have a lot of English people. They had a lot of people speaking English, even though obviously the native language is Spanish. I was super impressed with the level of English for the locals. Now, with that being said, it still does go a long way to being able to just not cause as much attention or draw as much attention to yourself if you are speaking English. So like during the day, like you said, you're probably fine, but anytime I could, I generally do try to speak Spanish just so I seem like, you know, a little bit more in the know. Maybe I'm like a local, I'm married to a local, or maybe I expatted there and I know the city really well. You just kind of take down the level of your targetedness, being able to speak even like intermediate level of the language. So I always do recommend that. Other than that, like overall, I felt very safe in the city compared to some of the other places I've been. Like even from Lima airport, there was a lot more aggressive and a lot more scams at the airport versus Santiago was like super normal and it seemed really easy to get a ride. But I do always recommend, you know, being conscious, being careful, being vigilant. Don't let your guard down. Don't dress like an asshole. Ideally, learn a little bit of the language, know where you're going, have a plan where you're going. You know, whenever you leave your hotel, maybe you do want to go adventure a little bit, but have a destination in mind. That way you're not like aimlessly going into streets you shouldn't be, or maybe getting yourself into more trouble. Additionally, obviously, you know, it's it's worth mentioning too, like don't elicit any illegal activities. Don't be trying to find drugs or ladies of the night or anything like that that tends to be where more criminals are going to be, right? If you're doing criminal activity, it's more likely you're going to run into a criminal. But essentially that's gonna be the video. Hopefully this was useful, a little bit of my opinion and recommendations for Santiago. It was a beautiful place, beautiful city. The people were super friendly and I had an amazing time and I'd love to go back for a longer period. But for anyone thinking about visiting in 2024, definitely a thumbs up. I loved the city. I think it was pretty safe to go as well. And yeah, that's pretty much going to be the video. Hopefully this was useful. If it was, feel free to leave a like or comment in the section below. Always helps the algorithm. As always, my name's Alex. Welcome back to Lifting Nomad. We'll see you next one. Peace.